Okay, good. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth and final webinar in the Claiming Water Rights webinar series brought by SERI together with the Mail and Guardian and End Water Poverty. Today's webinar is entitled Self-Supply, Lessons from Harrismith Water Heroes. My name is Alana Potter. I'm the Director of Research and Advocacy at SERI, and I'll be facilitating today. I'm joined by my colleagues, Kelebogini Kunu, who will be coordinating the chat, and Edward Malopi, who is our technical host. Tato Mashangoko is doing the live tweeting, ably supported by Yvonne and Tabogo from SERI and by Sam Taylor from End Water Poverty. There are a few housekeeping issues. Please feel free to type your name and organization into the chat so we have a sense of who all is in the room, so to speak. Please, and any contribution you may want to make. Please also type any questions or comments that you have into the chat as we go. And once we get to the discussion part of the webinar, Kelly will collate and put them to our panelists. Panelists, please keep your cameras and microphones off when you're not speaking and on when you are. So just by way of introduction, this series of webinars is based on SERI's Claiming Water Rights in South Africa research, which comprises 4 cases and a synthesis report, and examines and documents the different methods that communities employ to claim their water rights, ranging from persistently engaging government at different levels, and usually ultimately in the face of an unresponsive or criminalizing state, turning to protest, self-supply, and of course to litigation. The case study that informs today's webinar documents the efforts of an unusual coalition of residents and community leaders known as the Harrismith Water Heroes, who in the face of continued poor service delivery took it upon themselves to fix their town's water infrastructure. The provision of basic services in Ntabazwe, Harrismith and surrounds has deteriorated steadily over the past decade, fueled by political infighting, crippling debt, and the collapse of governance and administration within the Maluti municipality. By July 2018, many municipalities had had no water for 40 days or more. Some local farmers stepped in and supplied water tankers, but many businesses closed down. Petrus van Eerden, a local farmer, and Sam Twala, who's with us today, a community leader from Ntabazwe, went to the Nivias pump station to investigate the nature of the problem. This chance encounter sparked an unlikely coalition. Well, the Maluti municipality is by no means unique. Increasing numbers of residents in rural areas, informal settlements, and small towns across South Africa are relying on self-provisioned water supply as municipal water services fall into deeper disarray. The struggle for decent water services in the area is also by no means over. In January of this year, 2020, residents of Kwakwa took to the streets in a 3-day shutdown to demand water, their protest fueled by the death of 8-year-old Musa Mbele, who drowned while she and her sister were collecting water from a river. Maluti is also not the only place where people are doing it for themselves. In Shakuma, for example, in Toyando, in Limpopo, 11 self-run water supply schemes provide water to more than 2,300 households. Barbara van Koppen from IMI is here. She can be contacted for more information on that if she doesn't have time, if we don't have time to get to her during discussion. But the Harrismith Water Heroes provide a clear and compelling example of non-profit service providers operating in a small town which is home to 40 or 50,000 people and where municipal services have failed. Today's webinar will explore the controversial issue of self-supply. What are the opportunities, implications, and risks of self-supply, both from an international and a local perspective? How can government better support community self-reliance and resilience? How can municipalities harness self-supply in their turnaround strategies? And what is the media's influence on public narratives about service providers and municipalities? To explore these and other pressing questions, we have a wonderful set of panelists with us here today. Sam Twala is the head of the Harrismith Water Heroes, as we said, a non-profit, non-political service delivery organization that has taken it upon itself to repair dilapidated municipal infrastructure and improve solid waste, water, and electricity services in Harrismith. After a short film clip on the Water Heroes in action, Sam will talk about how the Water Heroes came about and about the ups and downs of doing this work without official appointment. Afterwards, John Butterworth, who is the director of IRC WASH's Global Hub and has more than 20 years experience in, among other things, alternative approaches to water supply in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. John will share lessons from international experience and give examples of how self-supply works in different countries. And then Neil McLeod, who was head of water and sanitation at the eThekwini Metro for 22 years, and who has since then provided local and international consulting support, including to the development and implementation of municipal turnaround strategies in South Africa, will bring in the municipal perspective, help us to address the question of what must happen to fix what appears to be a broken municipal water services system. These inputs will be followed by a brief Q&A and discussion session, after which Bongakile Matupe, an award-winning journalist from the Mail and Guardian with a special interest in politics and local government, will address the role of the media, not only print media, but the media in shaping the narratives about service providers such as the Harrismith Water Heroes and municipalities. And so with that, I'd like to welcome you once again and hand over to screen the introductory film clip. Welcome.
Just running in this
thing to fail. And obviously, what can we learn from what's happening elsewhere was the question I was asked to speak to. I think it's clearly dramatic when when households lose service like that, when citizens lose service. You know, it happens. You see it happening in this case. It is unfortunately an everyday occurrence for many households. The kind of community water supplies we've put in across a lot of African countries, for example, fail at an alarming rate. And then what happens when things fail? Well, it is, as in this clip, communities or households themselves that step in to fill the gap in some cases. And there are many examples of where this happens. And it's incredibly underestimated. The scale of households that are involved in some form of their own provision and the scale of activities by communities in providing water supplies is massively underestimated by the sector. And it's really not unusual for them to make major inputs in developing their supplies. I've had the pleasure the last couple of years working on a book with Sally Sutton, who may be with us, I'm not sure, who's really pioneered the use of this term self-supply. And she writes, for example, about cases in Ireland from the 1960s where there's only 12% pipe supply to household. And the approach to really transform that was based around group action, groups working together, often digging the trenches for the pipes. So in somewhere like Ireland, there's a tradition of community help, self-help, was really important in making it possible to get services to everybody. And we still see that many households do things themselves at the individual household level as well. Yeah, and it's really common, and it's a little bit sad that unfortunately we often forget about these community contributions while wanting to reach, obviously, for the best possible services that are professionally managed. So yeah, perhaps a key takeaway for me is this level of community engagement can be really underestimated. At the same time, it can be overestimated because we also have other cases where we put too much burden on communities to solve things that they don't have the social capital that we see in this case to get it together and to solve the problem themselves. So it's different everywhere, but this level of community engagement is really a key factor in many places to whether services are sustained. Alana, that was my few key points. I don't know whether you want me to give any more examples or you've managed to get Sam back on the line.
I don't actually see Sam here. I mean, John, I'm sure this will also come up when Neil speaks, but one of the concerns people have with self-supply is that it kind of leads to unregulated and inequitable water services at one end, and at the other end to kind of sort of privatization. What are the kinds of the kinds of things that you lessons or kind of issues that you have to share around some of your experience?
Yes, so yeah, those are two very common arguments applied, and which lead to the fact that many professionals working in the sector, many officials are not supporting self-supply. So yeah, one idea is that it's only a few rich who are able to take on the agricultural land, for example. Yeah, and this may clearly be true in some places. At the same time, where we've undertaken, or other countries, we see that everyone, you know, across all groups of society, people are stepping up to fill the gap. So it's not only the richer households who will invest in a well or a borehole and then making improvements to that with the way they pump water and supply it on their property. There are many poorer households also engaged. The real challenge is that whether any of those gets any support, whether they get any kind of financial support. If the question of supporting one particular form of supply, i.e. higher levels of service, and we're forgetting a other form of supply, which isn't ideal. US today are very loud of this alternative. It's the most equitable thing to actually support those other forms of supply, which will often be the only ones that can reach scattered households. Or we've even seen in this case, you know, urban households make orders until other forms of making it out.
John, I think a lot of people were struggling to hear you there. I wonder if it'll be any better if you could repeat the last few. I see you got cut. Would you mind just repeating the last few minutes of what you said? For most of us who didn't hear you.
Yeah. What I was saying at the end is a lot of are you hearing me now, Alana?
Yeah, you're clear to me.
Okay, so I'll try again. What I was trying to say at the end is a lot of our effort as professionals, a lot of our sector's investment in water and sanitation services is obviously being channeled through some specific service delivery models. And we're trying to get, you know, piped water supplies to everybody by 2030 under the Sustainable Development Goals. In the meantime, services are received by households in a variety of other ways. I think what's inequitable at the moment is that while we try to reach and improve those provide those well-managed services to everybody, that we don't do enough to support communities or households who are filling some of the gaps. And the lesson we see from other countries, there are many examples in the book I mentioned that I've been working on with Sally Sutton, you know, from the US, from Germany, from Denmark. Harnessing those community efforts has been a deliberate strategy to help the sector move forwards, because we all lack capacity, so we need help wherever we can get it. And sometimes we can get that help from community. At the same time, we can easily overestimate, for example, in what we've assumed communities can do across Africa with respect to managing their own raw water supplies. It's really difficult for them. I think that was a summary.
That's pretty good, thank you. We'll come back to this question of what government can do to support self-sufficiency and resilience. But what I want to do now, I think maybe a good time to get some input from you, Neil, from the municipal perspective. So you've heard and you're aware of the story of the Harrismith Water Heroes, as well as John's input on self-supply in other countries. I believe you have a presentation to share with us. I mean, this question of how can self-supply be harnessed in municipal turnaround strategies would be really important to address, I think. So welcome, and over to you. And you can take your camera off if you like, if you worry.
I've got strong bandwidth, so but if it chops, start shouting at me. Or put your camera on and wave at me, and then I'll know. Can you hear me okay, by the way? Alana, can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay. So maybe I just start with what I heard in the clip when the administrator spoke. And self-provision in South Africa does have issues. There are moral and ethical issues, but there are also risks for those that provide the service. Because as the administrator said, working in the public space is a contravention of the law. So that if anything goes wrong, those people have no protection, number one. And in fact, they lay themselves open to, ironically, to being charged for interfering with municipal assets. The other thing is that from an ethical point of view, the cost of providing services to everybody should have some kind of cross-subsidy. So the poor should be cross-subsidized by the rich. Here you've got one farmer cross-subsidizing financially a whole community, and you've got all the people that are working, sacrificing their leisure time and their opportunities to work for an income, having to give up their time to make sure that they get a service that the municipality should be providing. Now, if I just take you to the next slide, this is a map that results from a survey that's done every year, municipal self-assessment. The municipalities are asked, how well are you doing? And the irony is, if you look here where my laser pointer is pointing, that is Maluti-a-Phofung. They rate themselves as moderately stressed from a financial point of view. The reds are extremely vulnerable, and the brownie colors are highly vulnerable. And what that means, if you look at the bottom, you can see that only 6% of all the municipal water services authorities, only 6, these green ones, regard themselves as having a low vulnerability. So, sorry, 8. You've got 6% of the 144 that are not highly or extremely vulnerable, with a few moderates thrown in. And here is a summary. It's actually worse than that. There you see 40% extremely vulnerable, 38% highly vulnerable. And if you come down here, 64% don't even have a plan, right? 50% don't have functioning water treatment works and wastewater treatment works, and a whole lot don't have enough water. So Maluti represents the norm in South Africa, sadly. I've found from work that I've done in many countries around the world that this model that I developed many years ago is what needs to be done if you're going to have a successfully operated municipality. And sadly, most of the time we spend looking at the infrastructure, this here, asset management. There are things you can't influence, the legislation, the policies, the institutional structure under which you operate. And at the moment, you can't manage the fact that there are 144 water services authorities, and most of them are actually insolvent or non-functional. But if you get the customer relationships right and you get the revenue management right, then you generate enough revenue to then spend on this side and be able to fix what you've got and deliver new infrastructure where it's needed to serve more people. And it's on a foundation of sound people. And there's a virtual circle here. If the customers are happy, they pay. If they pay, you can fix the assets. So the meters work, the mains get fixed, makes happy customers, and they pay you more and more and more. To come to the revenue aspect, there is a Division of Revenue Act, which provides for subsidies to all municipalities. And this subsidy is not conditional. The government can't tell municipalities how to spend it, but when they publish it every year, They tell you how it's been calculated. So the Division of Revenue Act allocates to Maluti-a-Phofung 647 million rand in the current year. And if it applied these ratios, it should give 160 million to water and about 130 million to sanitation. The sad thing is that most municipalities don't do that. And as the video said, you see it being used not for operating, not for providing basic services, but for buying BMWs and Mercedes and staffing municipal offices with a whole lot of people that have got nothing to do with water, electricity, sanitation, and refuse removal, but everything else. So this subsidy, which comes from government every year, is not being applied to do what it should be doing. And I wonder if the community has been able to ask the administrator and others, where's all this money gone? Where's the 647 million disappeared to, that they say they don't have any money? I guess, and it was mentioned also in the video, that corruption is a big issue. I see it everywhere. And that's because the separation between politics and the executive, or oversight in the executive, is almost non-existent. I've worked in some municipalities as a consultant where the MMC for engineering services has chosen not to sit in the town hall, but sits in the engineering services building, one door away from the director of engineering services, and intersects everybody that goes to see him and says, why are you going there? No, come and see me. I'll tell you what to do. And so I believe that the law in this area is so weak, if it needs dramatic changes. If a politician issues an instruction to an executive or a member of staff, he should be fired. We should not be allowing people to move from politics to the executive and backwards and forwards, because there is no separation of powers. Above this subsidy, there are also other subsidies, RBIG, MWIG, which are available from government to build new projects. And I wonder how successful, even how much effort Maluti has put in to getting those subsidies, which are freely available to everybody. Even the metros get it. So what needs to be done? First thing is, because I see such emphasis needed to be laid on communication with communities, the politicians should not only be going to their communities a month before elections, but there should be regular meetings, both between the management and the communities, to identify the crises, to deal with things. When I ran eThekwini, we used to meet our ratepayers, or customers as we call them, in 19 focus groups every quarter. And we had 19 user platforms every quarter, which are divided by ward. And we had about 8 focus groups, people with disabilities, people in informal areas, business people. So we could talk to them on an open agenda about what we were doing right and what we were doing wrong. The problem is, though, that many politicians see civil society as a threat. I've had that said in meetings. We don't want those NGO people here because they just want our jobs. But my experience is that they have a very valuable role to play. And when we started these focus groups, suddenly there was a coming together and a vast change from both sides in terms of service delivery. And because this communication is so poor, then fake news is rising and generating other reasons why there are these problems. I also believe that there are too many water services authorities and too many water services providers. Most of them, as you can see, only 6% regard them as having low vulnerability. We need to restructure the landscape, have less, so that there's more opportunity for cross-subsidization, and so that they can manage the funds properly and attract the right people. I mean, who wants to go and live in the back of nowhere? People want to be based in big cities where there's full facilities, and in that way you'll attract the professionals. So the most contentious way that I know of dealing with this thing is a short-term kind of treatment where we use management contracts. We bring in the private sector. And I agree, the only way that our law allows us to deal with paying people formally is through contracts, through open tenders, competitiveness, so that we try and address the problems with corruption. But of course, any thought of management contracts, I'm not talking about selling of assets, I'm talking about bringing in a private sector organization for 5 years to turn around the situation. There's huge opposition from trade unions and from the political policymakers. I still don't know why, because it creates jobs and it has a salutary effect. Joburg Water is a case in point. Joburg in 1999 was a basket case. They were 700 million in debt. They had no management. Nobody would lend them any money. And the CEO of the day, the municipal manager, Ketso Gordon, said, we're going to bring in the private sector. on a 5-year contract with clear deliverables, sort all these problems out, fix the assets, fix the community consultation process, sort out the call center and all those things. And in 5 years, they went from nobody lending them money to a very viable, very successful, well-run operation with the right staff trained in place. And in fact, the management contractor had to work himself out of a job over 5 years. He was only allowed to have 10% of the people at the end of the 5 years that he had at the start that he'd brought in. But there are problems. The Section 33 of the Municipal Finance Management Act says you can only have contracts for 3 years. And if you don't do that, it's almost impossible to get around that. And seemingly the Treasury won't budge on that one. And then there's the Municipal Systems Act, where Section 78 is a huge obstacle. It's heavily oriented towards forcing municipalities to either do things themselves or to use water boards. And it is so daunting that very few municipalities even think of this process. So these two acts and the regulations need dramatic review. So that's my contribution. Not a happy story. It's time for municipalities to step up and do the job that they're constitutionally obliged to do and provide services and make them affordable to everybody through cross-subsidization. Thanks, Alana.
Fabulous. Thank you, Neil. Can I ask you, how do you, I mean, clearly sort of being able to engage small-scale private sector organizations able to provide services is one of the ways in which you believe municipalities can turn around services. Can you, is there something more that municipalities can be doing to harness the energy that is going by various communities, social movements, civil society organizations into self-supply in desperate circumstances? What can they do better as an interim step before we see legal reform that enables them to be contracted, for example, through a competitive tendering process?
Alana, our law is very restrictive. The only way I was ever able to do that was to bring in somebody, contract somebody as a kind of franchise holder, who in turn would then contract the communities. So we replaced 2,000 kilometers of water pipe using small businesses, but there had to be a tender and there had to be a way of channeling the money through somebody to get to those people. Many of them, I mean, they couldn't afford vehicles. You heard in this town, they were using the municipal vehicles. In our case, we said to the person we contracted, you provide the vehicles to the communities to do the work, but get them to do the work so that the money flows down into their pockets. It shouldn't be the farmer that's paying the money. It should be the municipality that's paying with their 647 million that they get every year from government. So that's not an easy one. Self-supply, in terms of what John said, is an option where in your own area, you do your own thing. But then that's not working on municipal assets. That's working on your own assets. It's like sinking a borehole in your garden and putting in your own treatment plant, or taking your community, which has got no services from government, and putting your own borehole down and doing your own thing. But then you have problems with water quality. What happens if somebody gets sick and you haven't tested the water, or you don't have a competent person to do the treatment? You expose yourself to risk. Oh. So yeah, there are ways to do it. It involves tech, but it just needs some imagination to get it done.
And that is the point, is getting creative about this. I wanted to speak, and the height of creativity is sitting on this panel, Sam, but he's now disappeared, just as I was hoping to get him back in to kind of give a bit more input. It is a bit unfortunate. So what we can do, I think, is open up to talk to some of the questions that have been coming through on the chat, and let's have a brief discussion session. I don't know Kelly, how should we do this?
So I've just sent you a couple of questions. So there are a couple of comments, a couple of questions directed to all of the panelists, and some of the questions are directed to specific panelists. So we can maybe start with just there's a last question, one of the last questions that came up in this presentation from Neil from Virginia. And she says that the current human resources in many municipalities, at least rural ones, is that enough to reach many remote areas. So it is not better for municipalities. Is it not better for municipalities to support community initiatives in self-supply, then Hope and official will go out once in 3 months to go fix a minor fault. What are the difficulties within municipalities to recognize co-management and co-ownership opportunities with community? So this was directed to Neil, so maybe we can begin there, and I'll send you the rest of the questions offline.
Thank you, Kelly.
Neil, you are, there we go.
So this is a case of what makes sense to do and what you can do legally. Because we're working in a situation where the law provides that only water services authorities and their providers can do this kind of thing. That's what the law says. So yes, it would be wonderful if these people could go and do the work. But we're just lucky that in this case, you're dealing with, honest people. But you can imagine how easy it would be to then just bring in your friend and agree to pay them money to do something. And we've seen lots of examples of this in the media recently with certain dairies and other things where, if the law is not followed, then you're going to get corruption. And how do you know that the person from the community that you've brought in is the right person? And it shouldn't have gone to somebody else because they could do it cheaper or more professionally. So yeah, the problem is not to put a band-aid on a festering sore. The problem is to fix the festering sore. And the festering sore here is a municipality that's clearly out of its depth and needs somebody to be brought in to fix the whole problem. All 5 of the boxes that I put up in my diagnostics matrix. Just going out and fixing a leak doesn't solve the problem because you're just kicking the can down the road because you don't get revenue. You don't deal with all the other issues. You don't deal with the water quality. You don't deal with the fact that you've got people sitting in the offices being paid money to do work and they're not doing it. Where are all the people that are being paid by the municipality? What are they doing? Why are they not out there looking for these leaks? As you say, every 3 months. That's just unacceptable. It all comes down to no accountability, no leadership. You'll find, and I've found this, I've been to treatment works where there's no staff. And I've said, where are the staff? Oh no, they haven't come to work yet. This is like 11 o'clock in the morning. Why not? Why don't you discipline them and fire them? Oh no, we can't because they're all the mayor's family. I've had that told to me. And that's a lot of the problem we have. Because of this, there's no separation, there's no oversight, there's no accountability. There's no allowing civil society to do community-based regulation. We should be allowing communities to hold meetings and call the officials to come to their meetings and be held to account. That's what the rest of the world allows, where they have effective community-based regulation. We almost seem to be fearful and scared of our communities rather than seeing them as our customers that we need to service and consult with and give a voice to. That's why customer to me is the most important aspect of this whole thing.
Absolutely.
And I'm ranting on like a preacher.
John, you look poised to come in. I also wanted to bring in either Barbara van Koppen or Virginia Malosa, who want to give a kind of rural example of self-supply. Which way around would you like?
I think do that, please, because you've already heard from me. But
okay, so Barbara or Virginia?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me? Yeah,
clearly.
Absolutely important points. We found in the project that we are doing with Water Research Commission with Virginia and Tobang, that it is important to distinguish between the type of technology at stake. So on the one hand, you have the complex boreholes, municipal boreholes, high-tech, and yeah, that is a government-owned and will stay a government-owned, and really, as Neil says, municipalities should act together on that. But for the smaller scale technologies, and then we talk about private boreholes or piped PVC pipes, JoJo storage tanks, etc. For the smaller scale technologies, we have found a tremendous buy-in in the communities. Can we please plan, design, and construct it ourselves? Of course, with technical support and advice and quality control. But the moment for the smaller scale technologies, the communities themselves start engaging before the planning phase even, we get a buy-in, that will be very, very sustainable in the long run as well. So co-management and distinguishing the type of technologies at stake, and nothing about us without us, as our communities say.
Excellent. Thank you, Barbara. Sam, we seem to have you online. You've heard from Barbara from the example in Limpopo. Can you tell us about Harrismith? We would love to hear from you.
No, I can't hear anything.
I think it's possible that Sam needs to unmute. I see you talking into your phone, Sam. Is that?
Yeah, but he's on mute.
Is that Tukele or Ed? Okay. Let's see what happens with Sam coming online. And John, in the meantime, I think you may have a response to some of the questions that have been directed to you.
I'm very happy to respond to a question. Or I could, can I? Alana, do you hear me?
I do hear you now, but I would say your bandwidth.
Yeah, I'm going to kill my video if that helps. Is that better? Can I respond on a couple of those issues that Barbara and Neil highlighted?
Sure, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Or if it's too bad, please go to somebody else.
That's absolutely fine. Please go ahead. You're clear. John, are you still with us? We're more or less plagued by connectivity issues today. Kelly, are there any specific questions that you need anyone to address?
So I see that Virginia has her hand up, so maybe we can give her a chance to speak.
That's a good plan.
Hi, Elena. I hope you can hear me.
Perfectly clearly. Thanks, Virginia.
Fantastic. Thank you. Firstly, I think congratulations on this excellent webinar, much needed. And it's a great pity we can connect with Sam and many other communities in rural areas, particularly, who are going through huge disservice, and simply because our municipalities are not responsive. I'd like to make a comment on what Neil is saying, and I agree that there are legal difficulties, and for the examples that he cited, that what if there is a water quality outbreak? What if the system breaks down? But I think at the same time, the reality is this, Lana, that as we are muddling through the difficulties that communities might experience, they are sitting with no service at all. I hear that Neil is saying we need to hold the municipality accountable, they need to do better and so on. But currently, the state of services is appalling and is deteriorating, particularly for rural communities. And I think one of the things that we really need to have an honest chat about is how the accountability is arranged in this country. Most of the time, we are then looking at those in the higher echelons to actually be accounting less and less to the communities. And I think that is what is wrong even in this case. Municipalities right now know that they don't have to do much to the communities. They don't have to account for what is happening because they have the law on their side. We actually need to start to challenge that narrative where municipalities feel or know that or are reminded or are urged to actually know that the accountabilities as is in the IDP, in the WSDP, it's actually downward, not the other way around. Even for appointed contractors, accountability is to the communities who are meant to receive that service. The last point I want to make, Lan, is that in fact, the experience that we have in Sekhukhune and Vhembe district municipalities is that for those schemes that are run by the communities, incidents that Neil refers to are very rare. I'm not saying that they are not likely to happen, but they are very, very rare because there is that kind of accountability within those schemes. Communities are able to hold each other accountable, and incidents of corruption or vandalism and stuff like that are at the minimal. And therefore, my question was, in those cases, what is making it so difficult? Municipalities can see these examples. So therefore, in those cases, what is so difficult actually about entering into a workable relationship with those communities so that services are not disrupted? Thank you, Len.
Thank you so much, Virginia. I think those are exactly the right questions and well put. I'm not sure if Neil wants to respond to that or if we should bring Sam in, who has now found another creative way of connecting with us through the telephone. And Ed has facilitated that. So we can hand over. Sam, it would be great to hear your voice.
Okay, Alana.
Ed?
Okay, so we have Sam on loudspeaker.
Wonderful. Welcome, Sam. It's great to have you. I'm sure you must be bursting to speak.
Hello, how are you?
Very good, thanks. Welcome.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
You're very clear. Thank you.
Yes.
We can hear you, Prasam. I think go on.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry for failing to connect to everyone and to all the listeners. We are very sorry. We don't know what's the problem. We tried it since from 8 o'clock trying to put everything together. Yes, Alan, where can I start?
I think it would be really valuable to hear, how did you come about, and what is your experience of working with the Maluti municipality? What advice would you have to anybody else who wants to help their municipality deliver services?
Okay, Alan, first of all, I would like to thank you and everyone. And lately you said, can I have input on the video that you have shown? Yes, it's very emotionally when you see things that you have done for the community, when it's being played repeatedly and other people seeing how important it is what you were doing, especially when we have started this true crisis while everyone doesn't have water. Everything started there. We stayed almost 40 to 60 days without water. Everyone was on top of my shoulder because I'm familiar with the acting CEO by the time of MAP Water, of which is the lady. we are so familiar with other social activities. Now, the other group saying, you killing us, you killing us. Why now? Because we don't have water. Why can't you utilize the platform to engage with the lady? We just stood up, we went out, moving around. Luckily, we met with two guys, of which is the farmer and the other one who's assisting the farmer. In everyone who was there at that problem, the two were different to others because we keep on saying, I can fix this, we can fix this. And I was listening at that time. Now to me, it reacts that why these two are keep on saying they can fix this while others are busy trying to fix it. Is then we started to engage with them. Then we called them to a community meeting. In the community meeting, everyone was invited. The media, map, community from different areas, looking for a problem. So from that meeting we met, we came up with an agreement to say we all go out and look for the problem. It all started there. As you're talking to Sam was just a normal person, knowing nothing about the water circulation and all those things. But now, Sam is an expert. You can call me at any town, wherever, to say, come and assist. It's because we were doing that through passion and everything. When it comes to municipality and the administrators, look, administrators never helped us. Zero. They were not understanding. They were naming us, giving us different names. These blacks are being used by whites. It was surprising because even in town, some of the white people are saying these white men are being used by blacks. But what is important, people started getting water from their taps. While the pressure was low, we keep on fixing the pressure, keep on going up. We have learned a lot through this, and we highly appreciate. We cannot even hide to say something that carried us, it was one family, of which is Clapton's family. That man carried the whole greater Harrismith, not on water only, even on electricity. So to me, when I talk about this, I'm saying on that Friday, it was a calling for me to go out, and we met with these guys who managed to do very, very amazing things for us. So to all South Africans, we're saying, look, we might be part of the problem because we have kept quiet for a long time while we see things are going worse and worse and worse. Instead of talking, barricading the roads, fighting, why can't we change the mindset of the South Africans to say, let's stand up and do something rather pointing fingers and all those things? It is true, everyone can see. Our municipality go to it's a problem. That is the problem even to a child still to be born. You see? Mm. That is all which is happening. So if one can sit and say we're waiting for them to come again, we are lying even to ourselves. What is better to stand up and do something? And we have achieved, by so doing, we have achieved, and we still achieving. Recently, municipality workers were not paid. I'm not talking about far. 2 weeks back, there were water leakages all over town. Again, saying Petrus Clapton, said, hey guys, go and fix. Don't talk. Just go and fix. And we have done that. I'm not talking about far. Just a week. And we have fixed. People again were staying without water. We started asking municipal managers, are we progressing or are we dying? Stop naming us. We're just here to change the situation instead of pointing fingers and fighting you guys.
Sam, this is amazing and such inspiring stuff. I mean, this is the agency and the energy of people doing things for themselves. And you guys are just, are really our heroes. I wanted to ask, how is your relationship with the administrator? What is No, something Neil said in his input a bit earlier was, if only municipalities, instead of being threatened by communities, could harness the energy and the skills that are so evident in the Water Hero, and use that and build on it. What are some of those issues that you are encountering in Maluti?
If you can check on a video the attitude of the previous administrator, Mr. Lefatola, very negative. Why did we take, the reason we took that truck is to fix it and we use it to do what it's supposed to do. But it's so negative. He doesn't have money.